Hi everyone and welcome to another Gaffer in Gear. Today we're having a look at the Aputure Light Storm 1200d Pro. This is currently the world's most powerful Bowen mount light, boasting a 1200 watt COB. The unit is also weather resistant, not just the head but also the controller. It boasts 16-bit DMX lumen radio control, and the output is realistically comparable to an M18 HMI. Alright, so let's not waste any time and get straight into the pros and cons. And the first big pro for a lot of people is my most concerning negative for this light, and that is the fact that it is Bowen mount. So in terms of that being a pro, you don't have to have an inventory that is specifically only for this light. Attachments that work on this light can also work on your 600D and your 600X. So that's things like the Lantern 90 or the Dome 150. And possibly into the future, Aputure might have things like projection mounts for this, which might be compatible with the 600D and the 600X. But here's the thing that concerns me with this. Being a Bowen mount, it means that somebody could take an accessory, in this case, the Fresnel 2X, which was designed specifically for a light no more powerful than 300 watts, and then place it onto this light, which has 4 times that output. Now there is nothing here to stop this from working. So the problem is, it'll work okay for a little while, but it's going to trap a lot of heat, damage the accessory, and possibly damage my light. Now the next thing isn't necessarily a negative, but I think it's something to be very aware of, because it's going to catch a lot of people out the first time they use a system like this. So in terms of this system, we've got a wide angle dish, a medium dish, and a narrow dish. So this is going to become more predominant as a system into the future, particularly as COB lights become more powerful. It's the modern equivalent of HMI lens kits. Alright, so what's the thing that's going to catch people by surprise? How do you gel these? Right, particularly if you're used to hiring something like an M18 HMI, you're probably just used to getting the gel and clipping it on the barn doors. The problem with these dishes is they have a different size circumference, so you can't get a universal set of barn doors. Now if you just get your gel and stick it to the front of the dish, it's going to melt. So here's my solution. All of these dishes have a bit of a lip on the front, and that lip is just big enough for a nano clamp to attach to. So my solution is a little gel frame, a nano clamp, and an articulated arm. This enables me to gel the light, but also to pan and tilt it with the gel attached. Alright, so that's all the negatives I can think of. Let's quickly go through some of the pros. So the first pro is the build quality. It is everything I expect from Aputure's Pro range. Everything is robust, well thought out, and just looks fantastic. The next positive is the units are weather protected. I can't find any official IP rating, but I have used these out in the rain and they seem to go fine. The next pro for me is 16-bit dimming is integrated into these units now. So if you're running it over DMX, it is very smooth. None of this flickering at the bottom of the dims like we used to get on the previous lights. CRMX control is built in with no antenna. That is a big plus for me. I'm sick of replacing antennas on other lights. The next thing I really like about this system compared to others in this size is the control system is on the box. It's not on the head. So if you've got this low to the ground, the control box, and the head is high up on a stand, you can still operate it manually. And you can do this because the light comes with a nice long 7-meter head lead. So let's now get into how much it costs and what you get for your money. Now the system sells for about $3,400 US and about 5,350 Australian dollars. Now if you have a hunt around, you might find it a bit cheaper. Alright, so you get 2 bags. So this bag here, which a lot of people are nicknaming the drum kit, that has your reflectors in it, all 3 reflectors. And this bag here has the light and the controller and the head leads and power cables. So this bag has a carry handle at either end, a carry handle on top. It has wheels at the one end and a retractable, extendable handle for moving it around. All right, so let's pop that down there and have a look inside the drum kit bag first. So all three reflectors are stored securely inside each other. So I'll just open it up. You can see that we've got padding holding the big reflector in place. So I'll just take that out. And I'll remove the big reflector first. Now, inside the big reflector here, you can see some padding. That padding was holding securely the next size reflectors down. So I'll just give you a quick idea. I'll put the padding back on. This is how they're stored flat. So you can see that all three are protected. They're not going to bounce against each other. That's your one reflector. This is our medium reflector. There's some additional padding on this reflector to make sure it doesn't scratch the inside of that one. Now with this big case, everything is extremely well padded and very well protected like you would expect it to be from an Aputure product. Now one thing to note here, there is a space left in this kit for a reflector. So if you're traveling and you can't take both kits with you, you can select the reflector that you're going to most commonly use or most likely to use and put that into this bag as well. So saving on space when you travel. Right, the first thing we'll have a look at is the clamp that comes with the kit. And this clamp is to mount the controller to your light stand. Now they've got a few improvements to the design of the controller box. Now number one is you can mount it like the previous controller. You can mount it in this orientation, which I'm not a fan of, or you can now mount it sideways, which was my suggestion. Now the next huge improvement to this is where the inlets are. The inlets are now on the side of the box, not underneath where they're hard to find. All right, so let's go through our inlets. We've got a USB port for firmware updates. We've got DMX in and DMX out. Now, in addition to that, this thing also has built-in CRMX and it has phone app control. We have our local area network connector for our bigger studio jobs. Now we have two DC inlets. All right, so if you're just running off the one inlet, you can run the light at a maximum 50% power draw, but you need a battery system that is capable of outputting over 700 watts, so there's not many of those around. Now, if you run both inputs simultaneously, you can run the light at full power. So what I mean by that is two massive battery packs running together can run this light. Now, to give you some idea of how difficult that is, I've got battery packs that can output 500 watts each, and I could only run this light at 73% brightness off those two packs. All right, the next inlet is our AC power in, which is universal power. Okay, so it doesn't matter what country you are in the world, you can plug into that. Now let's have a look at some of my test results for this controller. Running at 100% brightness, it typically pulls 1,365 watt. The maximum power draw I recorded over 4 days was 1,377 watt. The unit is definitely power factor corrected. At 100% brightness, it has a power factor unity of 0.98. At 50%, that is still coming in at 0.97. At 25%, it is still in the 90s. And right down at 10%, it still comes in at 0.79, which is quite remarkable for a light that uses pulse width modulation dimming. So what does all that crap mean? Well, it means if you want to run this system of something like a 2 kVA generator that's inverter stabilized, this light will not strain the electronics in the generator. The light is also flicker free. According to my meters, it is running at 25 kilohertz. In addition to this, it has an additional frequency adjustment of up to an additional 2 kilohertz in 100 hertz increments. All right, next thing in the bag is the 7.5 meter head lead, not 7 meters like I said before. You also get a very long power cable, so you've got your regional plug at one end and a Nutrix power connector at the other. And finally, we get the light. Now, one thing I like about the light is the protection cap is bright red. So if you're on set and everything goes bright red, you know somebody's left the cap on, so that's a very good warning. All right, so let's talk about the light a little bit. First, we'll talk about the cooling. So you've got a large cooling fan at the back. as well as a large cooling fan or a very large cooling fan on the bottom. So it does run fairly quiet. You know, it's not silent. It's definitely, the best way to explain it, it's quieter than the Evoke, but it's probably on a par with or a little bit louder than, say, a 600X. But for the firepower of the unit, it's not the sort of thing I'm going to be running close to a microphone anyway because it's so powerful. Now, in the menu system, you can adjust your fan speed. So you've got Smart, which is what I leave it on. High, which is good for temperatures above 40 degrees Celsius. Medium, which is good for temperatures up to 35 degrees Celsius. And Silent. But if you select Silent, it'll only run at a maximum 100 watt output. All right, so let's have a chat about the COB because it's got a very unusual arrangement. Because the COB is so hot, you know, it's 1200 watts, it actually has to be sitting on the heat sinks back here. It can't be forward here like, say, on your 600s or your 300s and then have the cooling system running through the core here. The COB has to be back here on the heat sinks. So how they've got this to work is you've got the COB back here, and then this section has mirrors in it, or reflective surfaces, that are helping to bring the light source inside the holder on your Bowen mount dishes and things like that. All right, so how does that affect it in terms of shadows? Here I'm standing 1 meter away from the light and 2 meters away from the wall with no modifier on the light. And as you can see from the shadows, particularly on my fingertips, there is some double shadowing. Now this is me standing 2 meters away from the light and 1 meter away from the wall. There's still some ever so slight double shadowing, but everything is starting to merge at this range. Now, if you're using it at a distance of about 5 meters away, say through a window, you will get really crisp shadows. Now, the textures on things like lace curtains might not be as sharp as other COBs, but you still get some really good defined shadow edges. The next thing I did was pan the light around. The light still has a fantastic spread, but if you look very, very, very carefully into the center of the beam, you can see a little dimple or a dull spot, but you really have to be looking for it. Next, I tried the light with the F10 barn doors with the black dish to see if this gave me any double shadowing problems with cuts. As you can see here on the edge of the beam, there is a little bit of double shadowing, but it's nothing too bad. And here you can see that I can use the barn doors to give me very good spill control. And I can still get some good Cucularis action. Now my next concern was, would this design in any way impede the light's ability to adequately fill up a soft light modifier? Now as you can see in these photos, the Lantern 90 is perfectly illuminated. And it also does a great job of lighting up the inside of the Dome 150. Okay, so let's start going through the data I've collected on this setup here, the light with no modifier attached. At 1 meter, I got 51,900 lux, and at 3 meters, I got 6,430 lux. Now, those figures probably mean nothing to you, so let's do a comparison with that versus HMI, so you've got some sort of idea. Now, the 1200D with no modifier on it comes in at double the brightness of a 575 HMI Fresnel set to flood. It comes in at 40% brighter than an M8 HMI set to flood. And it comes in at 83% the brightness of a 1.2K HMI Fresnel set to flood. Now, I just want to point out, that's like it is here with no modifier attached. All right, let's compare it to other LEDs. Compared to other LEDs with no modifiers attached, the 1200D comes in at 178% brighter than a Forza 500. It comes in 116% brighter than its little brother, the 600D. And it comes in at 46% brighter than the Nanlux Evoke with no modifier attached. Now I'll just quickly give you some results for the spectrometer testing with the light with no modifier. At 100% brightness, I got 5,639 Kelvin, with an SSI score of 74. The TM30 color vector testing came in at 93% average color accuracy with an average 102% saturation. Here are the CRI scores, and only R12 is below 90. This is the spectrum distribution, and the white point came in with a delta UV of minus 0.0018, which means the light is less than a 1/8 correction gel from the Planckian curve and less than a 1/4 correction gel off the daylight curve. At 50% brightness, I got 5,595 Kelvin with an SSI score of 74. The TM30 color vector scores were 93% average color accuracy with an average 102% saturation. Here are the CRI scores, and only R12 is below 90. This is the spectrum distribution, and the white point came in with a delta UV of minus 0.0008, which makes it very close to the Planckian curve, but under the daylight curve by about a 1/8 magenta gel. At 10% brightness, I got 5,539 Kelvin, with an SSI score of 74. The TM30 color vector scores were 93% color accuracy, with an average 102% saturation. Here are the CRI scores. R10 and R12 are below 90. This is the spectrum distribution, and the white point came in with a delta UV of plus 0.0006, which puts it ever so close to the Planckian curve, but compared to the daylight curve, it's magenta by about the equivalent of a 1/8 correction gel. Alright, so let's talk about the reflector kit. So the burning thing everybody wants to know is, has Aputure fixed the hotspot issue in these hyperreflectors? And yes, they have. They are nothing like the hyperreflector on the 600D and the 600X. Now, there are some curiosities with these reflectors though. So when I first put these on the light, I thought their wide reflector, which is 45 degrees, I thought this was about 55 degrees when I looked at it by eye. And as you can see here with me panning it around, it does look wider than 45. Not quite a 60, but most definitely it looks like a 55 degree beam angle. Now with their medium reflector, which is a 30 degree reflector, I thought this was a 45 degree reflector based on how it looked when I panned it around. So after testing these, this is the conclusion I've come to. They are really being cautious in what they claim with these reflectors. Alright, so if you get the wide reflector, which to my eye looks like a 55 degree reflector, and you run a meter over the inside 45 degrees, which is what they are claiming it is accurate to 0.15 of an f-stop. That's what the variation is, 0.15 of an f-stop. So very, very even. Right? If you get their medium reflector, which to the eye looks like a 45 degree reflector, and you run a meter over the inside 30 degrees, which is their claimed beam angle, this reflector is accurate or has a variation inside that inside 30 degrees of only 0.1 of an f-stop. Now they're my readings, not Aputure's. Okay, so outside of that advertised beam angle, there is a lot of drop off. The beam becomes very uneven. So I think they're erring on the side of caution with what they claim. So let's see how these dishes perform when we use the light through a window, like we would say an M18 simulating daylight. The 45 degree dish gives us fantastic shadows and cuts and looks just like a Fresnel. The 30 degree dish isn't quite as sharp, but it still has beautiful cuts and shadows, and the consistency of the shadows across the beam is way more even than you'd get out of an M18 HMI. The 15 degree dish gives us our maximum output, but as you can see, it comes at the expense of texture and shadow quality. Alright, so let's have a look at the results with this thing with its 45 degree dish. Now I've taken two readings here, one in the center value and one on the edge of what I'm guessing is the stated beam angle. So let's have a look at how that went. So in the center value, I got 13,400 lux at 3 meters. And on the edge of what I'd consider to be the stated 45 degree beam angle, I got 11,700 lux. So compared to other lights, that comes in at 12% brighter than a 2.5K HMI Fresnel set to flood. It comes in at 91% the brightness of an M18 set to a matching 45 degree beam angle. And it comes in at 94% the brightness of the Nanlux Evoke with its 45 degree reflector on. Now with the reflector on, the light comes in at 5,633 Kelvin with an SSI score of 74. The TM30 color vector testing came in at 93% color accuracy with an average 102% saturation. Here are the CRI scores, and only R12 was below 90. This is the spectrum distribution, and the white point came in with a delta UV of minus 0.0004, which puts it almost on top of the Planckian curve and about a 1/8 correction gel off the daylight curve. Now let's take a look at this beast with the 30-degree reflector. So the center value came in at 21,000 lux. Now on the edge of what I'm guessing is the 30-degree beam, I got 18,900 lux. Now I'm going to give you a stat that initially is going to sound totally crazy. Compared to Aputure's 30-degree dish, the Nanlux Evoque's 26-degree dish came in at 95% brighter. So you're probably wondering, how is that possible? Well, here's what I think's happened. Aputure have gone with practical size versus Nanlux, who have gone for maximum output. That's the size difference in the two reflectors. Now the Aputure reflector might not be as bright as the Nanlux 26-degree reflector, but it has way sharper optics, particularly through a window, whereas the Evoque's 26-degree reflector has very dull shadows. So the reason I'm pointing this out is this concept of having different dishes is fairly new to film and television lighting. So here's a quick rule of thumb. Smaller dishes give you sharper shadows. These big longer dishes, think of these more as intensifiers. These things are about maximum light output and not so much about getting sharp shadows. Now with the 30-degree reflector, the light comes in at 5,648 Kelvin with an SSI score of 74. The TM30 color vector scores came in at 93% color accuracy with an average 102% color saturation. Here are the CRI scores, and only R12 is below 90. This is the spectrum distribution, and the white point came in with a delta UV of minus 0.0011, which puts the light very close to the Planckian curve and a little over a 1/8 off the daylight curve. All right, now let's have a look at where this light really heroes, and that is with the 15-degree reflector. Have a look at this. All right, so this thing comes in at 3 meters, 61,600 lux. All right, so let's give you some comparisons. That is 107% brighter than the 600D with the F10 Fresnel in full spot. It comes in at 50% brighter than the Evoque with its spot dish, but that is only a 26-degree dish. Now it also comes in at 24% brighter than the Nanlux Evoque with its Fresnel in full spot, which is 11 degrees. And it comes in at 98% of the brightness of an M18 set to full spot. So at 98% the brightness of an M18 HMI set to full spot, this unit is worth considering for close-up work for high-speed cinematography, especially as this unit is way more flicker-free than a 1000 Hz HMI. Okay, so let's take a closer look at the beam that we get from this. So as you can see, you've got an intense 15-degree beam with a fair bit of drop-off on either side, and then a little bit of residual light after that. So that's pretty much the same as you'd get off a large studio Fresnel set to spot. All right, so where would I use something like that creatively, as opposed to say having a spotlight mount with a very clean 19-degree beam? Well, this is a shoot I worked on recently, and we had a lady that was pregnant, and we wanted to draw attention to her belly using lighting. So we had the 1200D with its spot reflector coming in through the window. The center of the beam was lined up on her tummy. As you can see, we still got a backlight everywhere else that looked natural, but the highlight was her tummy, where the hotspot of the beam was. Now, just to give you some idea of the firepower here, this unit was running at 18% brightness for that scene. All right, so with this dish on, I got 5,644 Kelvin with a TM30 color vector score of 93. The SSI score was 74, and the white point came in with a delta UV of plus 0.0004. Now let's have a look at how this light goes with the F10 Fresnel. And it is a usable attachment, but it's clearly not optimized to work with this COB configuration. Now this really shows up in your fine shadow details. Even at a distance of 3 meters away from the light, you can see multiple shadows coming off the Fresnel rings. Now you can still use the F10 for barn door cutting. It can still give you a reasonable cut, but it doesn't have as crisp a cut as it would if it was on the 600D. The firepower in flood and in spot is a little bit underwhelming. Now in full flood at a distance of 3 meters, I got 13,700 lux. That is only 37% brighter than the 600D with the F10 attached. It is 23% brighter than the Evoke with its Fresnel set to flood. And on a positive note, it does come in at 15% brighter than a 2.5K HMI Fresnel set to flood. Now Spot was also quite underwhelming. It didn't give me as tight a beam, and it only came in at 36,000 lux at 3 meters. Now to give you some comparisons, that's 21% brighter than the 600D with the F10 attached, and only 73% the brightness of the Evoke 1200 with its Fresnel in full spot. Alright, so just a quick pickup here for a note about the F10 in terms of how hot it gets. So a lot of people have asked me, does it get too hot? Do I have any concerns? Yes, I do. Alright, so I'm going to sum it up this way. I've had it for about 2 months of testing, and on a 25 degrees Celsius day, it is perfectly fine. I would have no problem at all running it. But on a 35 degrees Celsius day, it does get very hot. It actually concerns me. And the unit actually smells like a 10K tungsten light. You get that hot metal smell coming off the inside of it. So here's my gut feeling, and I've got nothing to back this up other than my gut feeling. If somebody wanted to hire it off me and it was a 25-degree day, I'd have no problem hiring the 1200D with the F10. If they wanted to hire it off me in the middle of summer and it's like a 35-degree day, 40-degree day, there's no way I would hire them the 1200D with the F10. I just wouldn't feel safe. Alright, so the last attachment I'm going to very quickly talk about is their Dome 150, their mega big softbox. Alright, so with the Dome 150 with the full diffusion at a distance of 1 meter, I got 12,300 lux. Now at a distance of 3 meters, I got 2,540 lux. Now to put that into some sort of perspective, that is 97% brighter than the same attachment on the 600D. All right, let's have a quick look through operating this unit, very quick look. All right, so your brightness is tunable in 0.1% increments. Now, if you press the knob, it'll jump to 20% increments. So give you quick presets. So very, very easy to operate. On the display, it gives me all my information that I need, like what I've got my dimmer set to, am I running off mains power, and the serial number of the device. Let's quickly go into the menu system. Now, I can select things like my dimmer curve. So I've got 4 choices there. I've got things like my, oops, let's go the other way. I've got things like my fan mode. So that's, we've already covered that. Studio mode. So studio mode, if you have studio mode selected, as soon as the light gets power, it will turn on. So what that means is if you've got this in a studio lighting grid, you don't have to climb up a ladder to press the on switch in the morning. As soon as you turn the power on, it will fire up. Next thing is our frequency selector. So I've already covered that earlier. And we've got our control system selector. So we've got Bluetooth, Lumen radio, and Ethernet. So very straightforward. We've got language. Do not touch that. Trust me, that is the worst thing you can touch. Factory reset. And we've also got update for which we use, what's it called? USB sticks for. And we've got our product information. Custom effects, that's something you can do in their phone app. I don't play around with the phone app at all. And we've got our DMX mode. Okay, so let's have a look in our DMX. All right, so we've got a choice up the top of the menu. DMX address, very straightforward, so no need to cover that. Loss of signal behavior. So we've got a few choices in here. It can go to black if it loses its signal. We can fade to black if it loses its signal. My personal favorite, which is hold the last settings. Now, why I like this as a setting is if my Lumen radio transmitter gets a flat battery halfway through a shoot or halfway through a shot, the lights don't go to black. They stay on what they're set to. Nobody knows I stuffed up, right? So that's why I love that one. And hold for 2 minutes and then fade out. So that's one that quite a few stage people like. All right, so let's go back in the system. DMX profile, I love this. We have a single channel profile. How annoying is it when people have a DMX system, something like this that has Lumen radio, and then it ties up 5 or 6 channels, and all you want to do is dim the unit. It's a waste of channels. Now, the other thing I like about this is if you're using something like the Exolux controller here, you don't have to have a profile. All you need is one channel. That's it, and you can dim it. So I absolutely love that. We've got a total of, I think it's 6, yep, 6 profiles. So we've got 8-bit and 16-bit, and you've got all your effects and your normal lighting mode that you can run over DMX. That's brilliant. They've really learnt about this. Okay, and DMX termination. So you can select whether this thing terminates the DMX signal. So what that means is if you've got DMX daisy chain from light to light, and this is the last one in your chain, you can set it up so that the signal stops at this light. It doesn't bounce back down the line and give you problems. All right, let's have a look at how she goes over CRMX control. Okay, so let's get into testing the DMX now, and we're running Lumen Radio in 8-bit in a single channel profile. So the first thing I want to show you is how good the smoothing is. So if you're running this unit off a manual desk, you can do adjustments without your crew or your talent having epileptic seizures. Very, very smooth control. Okay, first thing to have a look at is instant blackout commands. So the light comes on instantly, but it has a very quick fade to black. Now let's have a look at an automated 5-second fade to black. And a 5-second fade up. Now let's have a look at a 2.5-second automated fade to black. And a 2.5-second automated fade up. Now let's take that to a 1-second fade to black and a 1-second fade up. Now here's the only thing I can really fault. We're going to do a 1/2-second fade to black, and it does take longer than a 1/2 second, but it does do a beautiful 1/2-second fade up from black. Alright, so I think the days of small HMIs are numbered. Alright, so before we go, just something I want to mention. Luke Seerveld over at Meet the Gaffer, he's doing a review of this and comparing it to an M18 HMI through diffusion frames outside. So that's why I haven't covered anything like that. I'm going to leave that to Luke. So between the 2 episodes, you should have every piece of information you need to know as a working gaffer. Alright, take care everyone. See you on set.